Ovie, welcome to a brand new socially distant world.
Yeah, it's different. I think it's taken a lot of getting used to for everyone, but hanging in there.
How's it been for you over the course of lockdown?
It's been a bit strange. It's been a bit strange at first, but it took some time to get into a new sort of routine. I think everyone's tried to adjust the best they can. And now I've adjusted and I'm still able to work out and do things that are key for me in as much normality as I can. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I've been all right.
What were the key positives and negatives for you? What did you find that kind of you changed yourself, and what were the things that you found most challenging during this really weird time?
I think naturally it's just the distance from everyone. Funny enough, just because of my sort of path in basketball, because I've played overseas a lot, I've had a lot of time where I've had to spend time alone, and I've had a lot of downtime. It's just the life of a sort of overseas athlete. But now when you come home and you have those restrictions, it's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit tougher. But you know, with time, I think there's some positives you can take out of the downtime. You can take more time for yourself. You can take more time, you know, to reconnect with some people who maybe you might not have in a while. A lot more time to stop overlooking a lot of the little stuff.
Was being a basketballer, a professional, was that always something that was on your agenda? Was that your mindset growing up?
That was. Initially, like most kids in England, I love football. Always been a gooner. I'm an Arsenal fan. Grew up watching Henry and you know that whole squad. But I quickly transitioned into basketball around 11, 12. And yeah, like I just fell in love with it really. Everything about the sports, the culture around it, I fell in love with the whole deal. And eventually I was able to have opportunities to go and play in the States and further my career that way, but yeah.
What was that like as a young man with that huge opportunity that was presented to you to go over to Virginia and play high school basketball and take that path?
Really privileged. I do understand how much of a privilege it was. I knew a lot of guys who were really good players growing up, a lot of guys who were probably a bit more talented than I was. And I knew how much it meant to get the opportunity to go overseas and sort of just follow your dreams, especially at that age. I think for your parents to even give you the freedom and give you that sort of room at 16 to go overseas and do something like that so far away from home, it was a real privilege. So I always took it that way, and I just tried to make the best of the opportunity.
You were involved in the 2014 NBA draft. Just tell us a little bit about that procedure, because it's an incredibly important part of the game, and it's obviously, the make or break moment.
Yeah. It was a really interesting moment for me because like the way I saw everything mentally was, all right, I left home at 16 and this was the moment it was all for type of deal. I left home to go to the States because I wanted to chase my dream to play in the NBA. So there was a lot of anxiety around that situation. I felt like I put a lot of pressure on myself around that situation, and then I didn't get drafted. And that came with its own disappointments and mental challenges. Do you know what I mean? Because now you have to get your head wrapped around this idea that, okay, damn, you've put in so much and the goal that you've had in mind didn't work out exactly the way you wanted it to. But then I also knew I quickly had to get back on the horse and figure out, okay, what's next? I can't just sort of sit around and do nothing. And then that took me to France, where my first pro contract was, and that was a huge growing experience for me in itself. Being a first-year professional, you learn a lot more, that there's a lot more to being a pro than just playing the sports. It's the camaraderie around it. It's how you carry yourself as an athlete. It's being in the public eye. It's being able to be held to that sort of standard that the society will hold you to as a public figure. So I had a lot of growing to do that year, and it worked out well for me in the long run, I think.
Looking back on that moment where things didn't work out during the draft, how do you cope with that? You've touched upon it there. Obviously, a young man with a dream from a very young age. You put your whole life and soul into achieving something, and it doesn't quite happen. How big were the mental challenges that you had to overcome post that draft?
Oh, huge, man, huge. And the first thing I would say is there was heartbreak. Do you know what I mean? There was a painful period. There was a time where, you know, you sort of reflect on things, and that's when I think a lot of self-doubt can creep in, and you start to question things and question, oh, okay, well, how, why, and you know, and there is a period for that. But I didn't want to stay stuck in that, because that wasn't going to help me progress, you know what I mean? That wasn't what helped me get to that point, you know, and there was a moment where I had to say, okay, I didn't hit the primary goal I wanted, but I've come a long way, you know. If I turn back and look, I've taken a lot of steps. So as long as I've moved in the right direction, okay, how can I continue to build from here? What's the next step forward? How can I make sure I'm not sort of regressing, you feel me? So there was a really tough period, but ultimately I just knew to better myself, I had to find a way to sort of get over that hump mentally.
As a young man growing up, what were the key challenges you faced in trying to aspire to become a professional basketballer in the NBA and then subsequently in other leagues around the world?
I think the first thing is to sort of stick to my guns. It's very, very difficult when you're chasing something that is only reached by a very small percentage of people, because, you know, common sense will tell most people, all right, well, that's pretty unrealistic. And that was the first barrier, and I think one of the biggest hurdles I had to get over. I was like, okay, this is for me, this is something I want to chase, and, you know, I can't expect everyone around me to necessarily be on board or necessarily, you know, have the most positive mindset around it. You know, my parents, they were some of the first people that probably questioned it, and it wasn't out of a bad place. It was just, okay, they want the best for their son, so they would prefer I probably went down a safer route. But I figured out, okay, no, that's not for me though. So that was probably the biggest hurdle, and then there were more barriers as I moved forward, but that was probably the biggest one, I think.
When you're obviously aiming for, like you say, something that very, very few people ever achieve, how do you deal with negativity?
You know, the internal voice in all of us, it picks up on everything around us, and, you know, the company we keep, how, you know, what we let into our, you know, inner voice, that plays a huge role in that. And I wish I would have known that earlier. That's something I didn't quite understand the power of at a young age. And it did affect me in negative ways. You know, little passing comments are probably the biggest dream killers ever. It's the passing comments. It's not necessarily the person who says, oh, you'll never make it. That person, a lot of people just use that as motivation. It's your best mate saying, oh, mate, that's unrealistic. Or if it's your best mates laughing it off. Or it's your mum or dad saying, ah, stop being silly. Those are the ones that kill the dreams. Do you know what I mean? And it's being very aware of that, and it's being able to protect your mental space from these kind of comments. Because ultimately, if you hear them, internally you'll start processing them, whether you like it or not. So it's about just keeping your energy, your space around you, you know, very clear, and protecting, you know, your dreams and goals. You've got to protect them.
Have you got any techniques that you use for yourself to help with your sort of, you know, negativity or, you know, people saying negative things?
I mean, I try and wake up a little bit earlier and give myself at least maybe 10, 20 minutes at the beginning of the day. The first thing I do, just a bit of meditation, and I'll listen to just, you know, maybe a positive speech or motivational speech. But I feel like what that does, especially in the first, you know, 20 minutes to half an hour when you wake up, your mind is most receptive. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like by doing that, I've already almost put good energy in the bank. So, you know, I'm starting off my day and I'm setting the tone for the day before I've even got a text or before anyone's sent me a message or I've got a work email or anything like that. I've already set the tone, so I'm plus 50. So now anything negative that comes in, it might knock me down 10, but I'm already in the plus. You know what I mean? I've already set the tone for my day. And I feel like taking the time to set the tone for your own day is pretty important. A lot of us, we skip that. We wake up and we jump straight into the day, and that's very tough to do if you think about it. Start on plus 50, man. There you go.
Obviously, one of the other key things that people will know you for is reality television.
Yeah.
What was it like jumping into that world?
Oh, I tell you what, that's been one of the biggest surprises of my life. Like, you know, if you would have told me a year and a half ago, a year ago even, oh yeah, you'll be on reality TV in a year and people will be going wacky. I would have brushed it off, honestly.
Being in the public eye and the pressures that come with that.
Yeah, you know, so I felt like I got a little bit of training in being in the public eye, you know, prior to going on reality TV, which helped me massively. Because now, you know, trolling is a big deal, you know, internet bullying is a big thing now that a lot of people have to deal with and face.
You're in the generation that's sort of grown as social media has grown.
Yeah.
You know, you're in essence a guinea pig for this world
Yeah.
of social media. That, you know, you weren't educated about this growing up. It was something you had to learn about as it happened in the world. How bad is trolling and abuse for you personally?
See, like, trolling is there, you know, I'll get odd messages that, you know, I'd see that aren't very nice. And it's never nice, you know, whenever anyone insults you or says something mean to you, whether they mean it or not, whether it's a joke or not, they're hurtful. But, you know, I've realized the importance of sort of putting my phone away for a little while. And now I think that's something that's so hard for a lot of us to do because we work through our phones, we check our emails. Like, there's so much that we do that are tied to our phones. But if we are able to find periods of time, especially if you're in the social eye, just to put your phone to the side a little bit and have a break from it, it's very helpful, man.
How important is it that these issues are raised and spoken about, and that people of all ages can access people when they need to talk about these issues? Because historically so many people have brushed stuff aside and not opened up. But for you personally, how important is it that people do open up?
It's extremely, extremely important that people open up, that as much people open up as possible, especially people that are in the public eye. They open up and they're very honest about their experiences, because I believe that it is something that all of us face at one point or another. Do you know what I mean? Life gets mentally tough for every last one of us, regardless of how indestructible you think someone looks on the television, or your favorite athlete or performer, whatever the case may be. They've all faced some sort of mental struggle in their life, because we're all human. And I think the more we bring the subject to the surface and the more we allow people to realize, yo, it's normal that you're going through this kind of stuff, everyone's going through it in their own way, the easier it becomes for them to reach out for help, and they won't feel so isolated.
And what would your message be to anyone at all really that might be struggling with reaching out, their mental health, the way things have gone recently, the way the world's changed?
Yeah, my biggest message is, yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone. Don't feel isolated and don't feel like you can't reach out, you know, because I think that's the first mistake and that's the biggest misconception that a lot of us make at times. When we go into them, you know, the down moments, we can feel like we're the only ones that are feeling this sort of pain, and you know, it's uncommon, and no one else is sort of feeling that pain. But the reality is, a lot of us in life have just learned how to put on really, really good masks, and everyone's facing something. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out, because the help is there, man, and there are always people on the end of the line that are ready to help you and willing to.